Hello everybody and welcome. This is a crazysmarts.com production. Today we're going to show you how to launch an attack. Basically we're going to be using three main programs, and that's going to be nmap, Nessus, and metasploit. So let's waste no time and let's get started. I like to make some folders to help keep this attack organized. So I'm going to make an nmap and a Nessus folder. Then I'm going to move into the nmap folder and I'm going to create hosts and a sweep file, or sweep folder, excuse me. And then we're going to move into the sweep folder and then we're going to launch our attack. So sudo nmap -sp for ping sweep, and then the subnet you would like to attack. This is a class C network in our case, so /24 will be sufficient, and then we need to output that to a file that we'd like to call it. So I'm just going to call it something that I'll remember. Sweep.txt. And this is a pretty quick attack here, and we should get some results. And in fact we did. 7 hosts are alive on the network, and let's see if that did write out to the file. And in fact it did, but let's organize this a little bit. We're going to grep host, and then we're going to cut with the delimiter of space in field 2. Let's see how that looks, and that looks very nice. So let's output that to the host folder that we just created and name it what you would like. Hosts.txt. Now let's move to that hosts folder and make sure that it actually did write and that it looks okay. And in fact it does. But let's take our IP out because we don't want to attack our IP address. So I'm the node 113, so I'm going to take that out and I'm going to exit. Now let's open up Nessus, our vulnerability scanner, and we're going to use that file we just created to help assist our attack. So we're going to choose host in a file, and we're going to select the file that we just created under nmap hosts, and there it is. If we did this correctly, we should see our list of targets on the left side. Great. Now we need to connect to the Nessus server. So in our case it's running on our local host. You could run this on a separate server if you'd like. It's basically going to load all of the vulnerability plugins. The more plugins the better, because then it's able to find more vulnerabilities. So once this is loaded, we're going to change some default scan options. We do this by clicking the edit button, and I go to the options page, and I like to change host and payload to 10, and I like to change checks in parallel to 10. This is a good setting so it doesn't bog down the network and people don't get denial of service. So I like to also check all of the port scan options. Unless you're trying to be stealth, I recommend doing that, and make sure safe checks is enabled. That way if it finds a vulnerability that could potentially be denial of service, it's not going to attempt that denial of service on the system. So we select default scan policy and we're going to scan now. So if you've done this correctly, you should start to see some IP addresses here on the left side. Basically this is your report where while it's scanning you can view some of the vulnerabilities. So this scan is going to actually take you a half hour to an hour depending on how big the subnet is and vulnerabilities that it finds. So what I've done to speed this up is I've already got an HTML file that it's exported. So I'm going to show you what a sample report looks like in Nessus so you can get an idea of what you're looking at. I just want to show you one of the high severity problems that I found on my network. Node 108 has a very big problem, and I want to show you that. So if I scroll down, just missed it, I'm going to show you that this system is vulnerable to a service crafted RPC request handling. Basically, if we look, there's a patch already out, MS0867, and those of you familiar with metasploit know that there is an 0867 module already built into metasploit to try and exploit this system. So what we're going to do next is use the program metasploit to try and exploit this system and gain system level privileges to the machine. So this is part 1 of the series, and this is a Crazy Smarts production. So if you'd like to continue on, watch part 2. I hope you enjoyed your stay. Hello everybody and welcome back to this crazysmarts.com production. If you followed the first part of the series, I showed you how to use nmap and Nessus to find a vulnerable host on your network. Well, now that we've found the vulnerable host on the network, we're going to try a known exploit using the tool metasploit. So Nessus has showed us that the node 108 is vulnerable to the MS0867 vulnerability here. Well, metasploit has a built-in module to try to exploit this system, so let's see if we can actually exploit the system. So I've already got the MSF console already pulled up here. That's the only command I've issued here, and we can see that we have the MSF prompt. So now we're going to run show exploits. And basically this is going to show us a list of all the exploit modules that are built into the metasploit framework. And we're going to use the MS0867 that we found was vulnerable. And all we need to do is use that exploit, and you can see the prompt changes. Now we need to choose a payload. And a payload is nothing more than a set of code that is going to execute if the exploit is successful. So in our case, we want a shell. So we want to try to basically bind a shell back to our system to see if we can actually interact with the system. So in our case, we're going to run the interpreter. And if you see here, I have the bind TCP interpreter. So what I'm going to do is set payload and then the payload and hit enter. Now if I type show options, I now have the options that are required in order to make this exploit and payload work. And it looks like the only required thing is the R host, the remote host. So I'm going to set the remote host to the vulnerable system of the node 108. And now I'm going to see if I can actually exploit that system. And if all goes well, I should actually get a interpreter command shell and be able to interact with the system. And look, we do have an interpreter shell. If I run the command ipconfig, you can see that I have the IP address of not our system, but the system we just exploited. So let's see if we can run the command #dump. And what this should do is actually dump all the encrypted passwords on this system. So let's see if we can actually pull up a command shell now. Using the command execute -h to hide it so that the system actually doesn't pop up, it actually hides it. And then the file cmd.exe, and we want to interact with it, so the -i. And we do have a command shell now. Now we can run the command netuser to see what users are on this system. And we could potentially delete a user, or if you wanted to, we could potentially add a user. So let's add the hacker with the hacker password. And now if we look, you can see that we have actually added a user to that system. But let's see if we can add that hacker user to the administrators group. So netlocal group administrators hacker add. Now let's see if that user is actually part of the administrators group. Screwed up there. Can't type, I got some fat fingers here. And lo and behold, look, hacker is now an administrator on this local system. Congratulations, you have just exploited using Metasploit. This has been a CrazySmarts.com production, and I hope you enjoyed.